Hey everybody, good morning and welcome to the Mr. Maple Show.
I'm Tim.
And I'm Brian.
And we're MrMaple.com. We do over 1,000 varieties of Japanese maples, mail order directly to your door. Today we're going to help you a little bit about this summer garden. We're getting late spring, summer's approaching on us pretty soon, and we figured we'd give you some good tips for the summer garden.
Yeah, we know everybody's out there planting. You've been ordering tons of plants from us, so we really appreciate that. Make sure you sign up for our weekly email. We do 10 new plants every Tuesday at 10 a.m. And so we really appreciate you guys shopping with us. And we know this time of the year, everybody's kind of out in their gardens and trying to make sure they're taking care of their plants properly. So we wanted to talk about that a little bit today.
So one of the big things I want to talk about right now, before it really gets into summer, is watching out for weed killer. Weed killer is something we see every summer. Weed killer drift, or people putting out when it's too hot and the weed killer actually becoming a gas and coming up and hitting their tree above it. Make sure you follow your directions on your weed killer. Make sure you don't put it out on a windy day, and keep them away from your Japanese maples. If someone's out there working in their yard, make sure to say, hey, stay away from my Japanese maple with the weed killer, because we always see the photos, all the weeds are dead in the photo, and then they say, what's wrong with my Japanese maple? And we look and it's pretty obvious weed killer played a big role in that.
Yeah, right now, the weeds are growing fast. They've got a lot of sun and everything's heating up. And so, even though it may be more work, sometimes it's worth it just to go out and hand pull some weeds that are really close to your maples, because you don't want to risk that damage that you can cause to your beautiful tree.
And this happens a lot on high grafted lace leaves. And the reason being is you see one stem up and people think, I'm not actually spraying the foliage. If you spray the bark on a high grafted Japanese maple, you can kill it just as well as if you're spraying the foliage. So keep that in mind. Be safe, watch out for weed killer. Our other big tip is water. I mean, you had to deal with this a lot in Oklahoma.
Yeah, this time of the year, depending on what climate you're in, things are heating up and things are drying out. You start to get less and less rain patterns coming through your climate, depending on where you're at. So it's very important to pay attention to that. And one thing about gardening is you kind of get to connect with the way the world works a little bit more too. And so you kind of pay attention to how much rain you've been getting, how often you need to water, how dry things are getting. I think it's very important to maintain your maples throughout the summer properly.
Now, when summer approaches with that added heat, typically Japanese maples are going to need more water. Keep in mind, you don't want to make sure that you're overwatering. You want those plants to dry out before you water them again, but they may be drying out quicker this time of the season for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Mulch is going to be your friend during the summer as well. I ran into that a lot in Oklahoma. Just giving some protection from that hot sun on the surface area is going to kind of help keep some of that moisture locked in underneath on those top surface roots.
Yeah, that's a great tip for those high heat areas. Some mulch definitely helps. You want to watch out for too much mulch, because if you put too much mulch around the base, you can actually create a detriment, and that plant's going to start showing a lack of vigor during the summer. So keep that in mind, that you're not putting too much mulch around the actual base of the tree, but some mulch around where the where the roots are, yeah, like Brian was talking about, and that's really going to add that extra heat protection for you, but not stress out your maple.
Yeah, absolutely.
And watch out for those mulch volcanoes, because the summer is when you start to see the issues from that.
Right.
But mulch in those high heat areas is such an added benefit that we don't have to really deal with as much here in Western North Carolina, yeah, for those high heat areas.
Yeah, you always want, like Tim said, you always want to make sure you pull that mulch around from the trunk of the tree. You don't want the mulch piled up against the trunk. That can lead to a lot of different damages, insects, fungal diseases, things like that. So you want to prevent that, get that away from the trunk. But a nice round space around the maple definitely will help during those summer months.
Now, Japanese maples in containers are definitely going to need a lot more water this time of the season than they needed in the spring or the winter. So keep that in mind. Watch out for those bowls underneath them of water, because sitting in wet water is different from more water. That can cause root rot and wet feet, because Japanese maples still like to dry out. During that summer months, I often see people putting sliding bowls underneath their potted Japanese maples, and the heat and the water can cause the roots to catch Phytophthora much quicker. So make sure you avoid that, but you will need to watch your container Japanese maples and water them more frequently this time of the season than you did earlier in the season. And a good way to do that too, if you've got your Japanese maple in full sun out there in a container, bring it in a little more shaded location for these summer months.
Yeah.
That's going to reduce the amount of water that it needs and really reduce the stress on that plant, because that plant is relying on you to take care of it in the container, even in the summer. And sometimes those summer months we're going on vacation.
Right,
I mean, we run into that all the time. Someone said, I went on vacation and my potted plant didn't get any water.
Yeah, it's easy to forget about those too, because sometimes the trees that you have planted out in your landscape, there's not as much of that special care that they need. A lot of times they can just rely on the rain that comes through your area, whatever it might be. But in a pot, that's something you got to really be mindful of. And also you got to think about in the summer months too, that pot itself heats up a lot quicker. So just the radiant heat from the pot can dry those roots out even quicker. So, that's something to keep in mind.
And remember too, if you've got a young plant this is its first year in the ground, these summer months are going to need more water. I mean, they're trying to get established, they're trying to get roots out so they can take care of themselves, but they're a lot like a container plant.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to watch a young plant just like you do a container plant and make sure it gets plenty of water until it gets established. Because once they get established, they're a maintenance-free kind of plant.
Sure, absolutely. It was a lot like that in Oklahoma for me. That first year or two, I really had to be conscious of the watering on the younger plants. Some of the stuff that I'd had in the ground 2, 3 years, 4 years, I didn't have to water as often because they were more established. They had a deeper root system, so they were able to kind of maintain themselves through the summer a little bit better. But yeah, those young plants, so if something you've bought recently and you've planted recently, and here we are getting into the summer months, you definitely want to be more conscious of that.
But that is an added benefit of this added heat, is if you water it properly, it will get established a little quicker because those roots will search out for water, meaning they're growing out, searching for water. You water them, you let them dry out, you're going to get it established a lot quicker. So it's a big added benefit, but it does require a little more care this time of the season. So keep that in mind on your young plants. Japanese maples, they're really easy to grow. The summer garden tips, I think this is something that hopefully you can really grab a hold of a little bit. And hopefully you can take some tips from this and apply it to your summer garden so that your Japanese maples thrive and do well.
Yeah, we greatly appreciate you guys shopping here at Mr. Maple. We've had a huge year. It's been so great to be able to offer so many different varieties of Japanese maples, and things are going well. And we really appreciate all the support. And we know a lot of you guys have a lot of new plants out there, and you're planting away, and we appreciate that. And take care.
God bless,
and have a good day.